This right now is House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And Leader Jeffries, thank you for being with us this morning. We are trying to get a feel for where things stand. It means a lot to not just investors and consumers, but obviously the future of our nation, what happens here. I think the one thing that is now clear is that there is a negotiation that's taking place. This is not going to be a clean bill that is passed, a clean debt ceiling limit bill that's passed. And I guess we're still trying to figure out where things stand in those negotiations. What can you tell us at this point?
Well, good morning. There are certainly ongoing discussions, and in our view, those discussions are proceeding on two parallel tracks. One, we must avoid a catastrophic default on our nation's debt. It will be the first time we intentionally default in our 247-year history. It will result in triggering, in all likelihood, a job-killing recession, cost the American people millions of good-paying jobs, hurt the economy, hurt businesses, tank the stock market, hurt the retirement security of millions of Americans, and, of course, dramatically increase costs all at the same time. And so we have to make sure that America pays our bills in a manner that is done without gamesmanship, partisanship, or brinksmanship. At the same time, Democrats, under the leadership of President Biden, have always maintained that we are, of course, willing to discuss the budget and the appropriations and the types of spending decisions, investment decisions, and revenue decisions that should be made to protect the health, the safety, and the well-being of the American people. It was a very positive meeting yesterday. It was calm. It was candid in terms of the discussion. And I'm optimistic that common ground will be found in the next week or so.
Coming out of this, just trying to figure out what's on the table, what isn't. We're going to be speaking with Speaker McCarthy next, and he has said to the press that when it comes down to it, they're going to be insisting on tougher work requirements, and said that this is a red line that was drawn for what he expects to see. You've called this a non-starter.
Yeah, work requirements, so-called work requirements, are a non-starter. First and foremost, it's important to understand that in 2018, the last time we discussed the Farm Bill, 145 Republicans explicitly voted against an amendment that would impose so-called work requirements on SNAP recipients, including then House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Voted against it. And so it's entirely unreasonable to think that at this particular point in time, in the context of a debt ceiling showdown that has been manufactured as part of an effort to avoid a default, that these type of so-called work requirements can be imposed on the American people when there are already significant work requirements that exist under law, and Republicans previously and explicitly voted against them. We can have a discussion about those issues, but that should be done in the context of the Farm Bill, not with a gun being held to the head of the American people in a hostage-taking situation.
Leader, it's good to have you on, obviously, today. 2 years caps, 10 years. I don't know what that looks like in terms of spending caps. I don't know. How do you split the difference? Do you not do anything? And what are the chances for something that goes longer than just, for lack of a better term, kicking the can down the road? Is that still an option to get this done and revisit it in less than a year, or will it go out past the next election? What do you think finally happens?
Well, we can't continue to find ourselves in this situation where there's a flirtation with a default. It creates uncertainty that's bad for the American people, that's bad for the economy, that's bad for business. And so our view has consistently been that any resolution of this matter has to be at least 2 years in nature, and that was a position that was once again made clear in the meeting yesterday. At the same time, we should have a very aggressive discussion about deficit reduction into the future. President Biden, under his administration, in addition to all of the significant legislative accomplishments that occurred in the last Congress, including around infrastructure or the CHIPS and Science Act or the Inflation Reduction Act, reduced the deficit by $1.7 trillion, and then presented a budget that would not only protect and strengthen Social Security, build an economy that works for everyday Americans, it would also reduce the deficit by an additional $3 trillion. That's a total of $4.7 trillion in deficit reduction. That matches what the Republicans are proposing. And so let's have a conversation about the best way to get there. It can't only be draconian spending cuts that would hurt the safety, the well-being, and the health of the American people. We also have to make sure that revenue is put on the table, that we revisit sort of wasteful subsidies for big oil and big pharma. And that's a conversation that we can have, but that should be done in the context of the budget discussion and the appropriations discussion.
Nobody's talking about raising taxes in the debt ceiling negotiations at this point. This would be later, Leader?
Our view is that if we're going to have a thoughtful conversation about deficit reduction, that conversation can't simply be one-sided based on the right-wing ideological perspective of a handful of extreme MAGA Republicans. That's not how you make public policy and divided government.